Welcome to Global Touring in the New Reality. I'm so excited to have everybody here. I'm joined by three amazing professionals in the industry where we're going to be talking about how to focus on the human element and lead with empathy so that we can create a better, more sustainable future for the music industry. I'm Janine Diaz. I created the Tour Life podcast where some amazing people who work professionally in the industry entrusted me with their story. And now let's meet the rest of our panel.
Hi, I'm Britton Bilik. I am the tour manager for Josh Groban. I started in the music business when I was in high school as a promoter in Wilton, Connecticut, and since have become a full-time tour manager working with Nora Jones, Meghan Trainor, and St. Vincent. I'm currently living in Maine and in Los Angeles here producing live stream concerts.
Hi, I'm Marlene Tsuchii. I've been an agent at CAA for 19 years. I live in Los Angeles. Prior to that, I worked at William Morris and Artist Direct. I am the co-head of international touring, but I also do domestic touring as well.
Hi, I'm Rob Hallett. I've been promoting since I was 17. I was an agent for a number of years before moving more into full-time promoting. I've also been a manager of artists such as Usher. I've had independent labels over the years, and generally I like to think I'm in the music business as opposed to just one aspect.
Amazing. So I am so excited to talk now. And first, we're going to kind of just lay out what the situation is. We have been dealing with a pandemic. Everybody's world has been turned upside down. So let's just explore a little bit about how it's affecting your world and kind of what the conversation has been that has been happening in your own circle. Let's start with Britton.
Well, in my circle, I was on tour in March. Obviously, everything has come to a screeching halt. And so we've had to get creative and try to find new ways to engage with fans, with the artists that I work with. And I'm one of the lucky few that have been able to still have a job within this pandemic. And so we're trying now to figure out how we're going to go back to work. And I think that there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel right now. And it's a great conversation to start having for us to be able to restructure how we're going to go back to work in the new world.
And Marlene, how have things been going in your world?
Well, the touring business has been decimated, and we don't know when it's going to recover. So as a company, we have been trying to secure other means of income for our clients, whether it is, like Britton said, virtual shows, whether it's private engagements for colleges, they're all virtual, but brand deals. We've had a lot of podcasts now for clients. Book deals have been really lucrative. So there are some means of getting through this, but it is really survival time. And I think the polarizing aspect of the pandemic has been really hard for everybody to contend with. Yeah, it's just a struggle every day.
Yeah, I definitely can agree with the polarization. I think we're seeing that on all sides, obviously. And what about you, Rob?
I've got a slightly different story. I left Live Nation in the middle of this back in August. I saw it coming. I think that it was going to be longer than initially thought. And I thought the best way to navigate it would be to be getting out of a corporate structure. Because necessarily corporate structures are tied by their own needs of share prices, thousands of staff, real estate, and And I left it all to be more flexible. So I've gone back to being independent, getting a lot of traction with artists who also want to see a difference the other side outside of the corporate world, I think. And I'm also looking at other opportunities, rather like Marlene, of creating money for artists like we can't tour. I started a JV with a company called Innovators, which is going to start doing a celebrity liquor. We've got our first client, we're doing a vodka. I'm also looking at streaming a multi-format, a multi-platform format where streaming ends up on TV. and various things to try and navigate this COVID storm and come out the other side with a new world, because it's never going to be the same. It's going to be different, and I think we can come out better. The Chinese symbol for crisis also says opportunity, and I'm viewing this very much as an opportunity to navigate the curve in a freer way than the corporates are able to.
Absolutely. I love that you're deciding to pivot a lot and to get really creative with the way that you all are approaching things. And one of the main things that that I have seen with the conversations that I've been having through my podcast, especially, it started back in August 2019, and there was this conversation of mental health and well-being and taking care of yourself, and how that didn't always really align with touring and with the music industry, because it was very much a kind of a dog eat dog world out there, I guess. And now that conversation has been emerging more and more and more all over the world, but definitely in this industry. And so my hope is that the conversation will continue. So by being creative and by pivoting where we need to, and by caring about the way that humans and the human element is actually being focused on throughout the way that we do things in the future, I think that will put us in a good, sustainable place. Let's talk a little bit about some of the objections that have come up with this new conversation about doing things differently. Because I know that change and I know that doing things differently can be scary. So tell us, Britton, what about in your world when you're out on the ground and you're actually putting on the shows?
I think that we need to be careful. I think change is on the front of everyone's minds right now, and everyone is thinking about that we need to make changes within our business. From what I've seen, there was a lot of change that was occurring, and a lot of things up in the air. At the beginning of the summer, people were trying to get back to work, and now things are moving again, and things seem to be quickly going back into their old ways. And so I think that we need to be very careful with the way that we approach this and make sure that things don't slip back into their old ways, and that we don't necessarily get out of this what we need. So I think being very conscientious of that is important, and trying to have the discussion and have discussions like these is also important.
Yeah, I completely agree. And what about you, Marlene? Because I know that with agents and with the tour managers, you guys do work pretty closely when it comes to deciding how things are going to be. You're kind of out there putting in the actual work. So how does this reflect on your end?
Well, for me personally, I've always tried to work very closely with tour managers and production managers, because they are the ones who are in the trenches dealing with all the issues that happen daily. So I think not to be mindful of their needs and their and the challenges that they face. So for me, I think this whole conversation has to come back to really open communications with everybody, the whole team from top to bottom, and educating people that, we all worry about the bottom line all the time, but it can't just be about that. I mean, we've seen how fragile the human condition is with what's happened with this virus. It's all been wiped out just by one thing. So we have a chance to rebuild. I think we have to rebuild together versus in our own silos, which is what it feels like it happens all the time. Like Britton said, people kind of go back to their old ways. We have to rethink that whole thing. There's just too many casualties, and not just casualties of having a virus, but just casualties in general of this business. It's a tough business. Touring is not easy. And I think it's listening to all the voices, and that's what's been missing for a while.
And Rob, you've seen it from the fact that you decided to go from a corporate structure to kind of go out and be independent, where you have a little bit more, or maybe a lot more control over what you actually do and the way that you handle things. How have you seen, where have you seen the problem lie when it comes to why people don't seem to normally care about the human element involved?
I think, traditionally there's always been too much bullying in our business. Whether it's the bully manager, the bully artist, the bully production manager, there are too many bullies in our business. It's not as bad as it was 20 years ago. It was a nightmare. I remember some managers and agents shaking. I didn't want to call them, because there'd be, you didn't sell enough tickets, or the sandwiches were wrong in the dressing, or tiny things that used to make people go nuclear. It's improving. And I think a lot of those people are out of the business, but we all know the ones that are still in it. As a touring professional, I like to think that the crew are the most important people after the artist, because without the crew, you aren't going to get anywhere. So I like to, make sure when I'm planning a tour that there's that a day off truly is a day off and not a travel day. There's too much of 3 on, 1 off, 2 off. No one has a day off. I also try to, on days off, organise parties for the crew, dinners for the crew, make them feel, valuable as they are, and always when walking into arena, before you go to find the management or the artist, say hi to the guys on the stage, the techs, the backline guys, the production manager, the tour manager, the accounts, everyone that makes it work. And at the end of the day, if you've got a good relationship with these people and they're happy in their job, it makes your job easier, and it makes everyone's job easier and safer. You don't need a bunch of depressed, miserable, bullied crew walking around, because you ain't gonna have a great show. So I think it's very important that we focus on these folks and make sure that they're given the best working conditions possible. Catering, it's important they have a hot breakfast. Don't cut money on catering, because if you have your crews wandering around to get a McDonald's, you're going to wonder where they are. Have great catering. Don't cut corners on that. Stuff like that. I mean, just simple care of another human being, and we'll be fine.
So Britton, one of the things that tends to happen is that we all have this real need to really care for each other. And we're all into having this lovey-dovey conversation about taking care of each other and caring about how everyone is doing on the inside as well as the outside. But what happens when people stop caring? Isn't there a tendency to go back to old ways?
The answer is yes. And I think that having people who are responsible for the well-being of a crew are going to be very valuable. And you need to have people who acknowledge that it is easy to fall back in your old ways, but having someone who is very aware of everyone's well-being, and just like Rob said, trying to plan things to make it a positive work environment from the top down, and having everyone be conscientious and aware that it's a very sensitive and delicate new reality that we're facing, and trying to take care of people as much as you can is going to be very important. Just in the pandemic alone, I've been kind of trying to check in with different crew members and different band members. I think that there's been certainly a lot of people just looking for the conversation, which I think has, for some, it's something that I've tried to personally kind of walk on. It's kind of a fine line where sometimes I'm comfortable having the conversation with people and reaching out to them to check in how they're doing, but other times it can be an uncomfortable conversation because I am fortunate enough to be working. And so there's definitely a lot of people where I don't necessarily know if it's acceptable for me to reach out to them. But I think that what I've learned is having the conversation and reaching out to people has been really important during this time. And although it can be uncomfortable, there are things that we need to work through and try to, it's definitely helpful for people to have that conversation.
It definitely puts us in a very uncomfortable place when we have to have these conversations. I think change, like we mentioned before, is a very difficult place to be in. And when you realize that everybody around you is also experiencing a similar thing, it's very easy to kind of have that conversation, right? So, Marlene, you said you've been having conversations within your circle, and you also have mentioned that there's a heightened awareness of the human element within your circle. Tell us a little bit more about that.
I think Going back to what Britton said about checking in on people, because we're in a time of total isolation, really, and I think we're all feeling like we've lost control about everything. It's all in a way brought us conversely together closer, and so we've been having these conversations within our company and within the artists that I work with. But I think the conversations about and the educating about the mental health component has to come from, as he said, Bryn said, from top to bottom. I mean, it has to come from, I think, like the Michael Rapinos and Jay Marcianos and people like that who have to go across their companies. I mean, not just promoters, but agencies, etc., managers, artists. They all have to have the same conversation. We all have to have that same end goal, because when we do go back, we can't go back to what it was like before. I don't know. I think the fallout from that's going to be really bad. It's because it's going to be survival of the fittest. People grabbing for the money and everything. So I feel like baby steps are okay right now, but like we've got to bring it to that next level. We had also discussed, having publications like Polestar or Billboard or whomever also put pieces out that maybe podcasts, whatever. I just think we've got to spread this message wide, and we have to do it now while this is still happening before we all go back to the races, because then nobody's going to pay attention. Truthfully.
It is, and it's a matter of time, right, Marlene? Because, like I said, it was really hard to pin everybody down when everybody was on tour, but right now is a great time. So, Rob, you have seen you've been at the table with all of the decision makers and things like that. So, give us a little bit of insight about what it's like and how can we make this conversation click for the people at the top?
It's tough. I think the people at the top at the moment are doing an incredible job keeping the ships they've got afloat. I think Live Nation's share price actually went up in the middle of the pandemic, which is a magical feat that only Michael Rapino can do. I've got a lot of respect for him there. Jay doesn't have to worry about that with AEG because it's a private company. However, I think there's going to be a rise of the independent because we don't have to worry about any of that. We don't have share prices. We don't have billionaire owners. So I think as long as you can get the right backing, there could be a new model of navigating. And I think everyone working together and new unities and partnerships and everyone feeling that they're a stakeholder in this will also help, the mental stability. I'm talking about vendor contracts. I mean, Britton was mentioning about things going back to normal and everyone, wanting to go back to their rates before they even know it. I've got very positive vendor conversations going on where I'm saying, okay, look, take part of the risk with me. I'll cover your costs. It costs you so much to get your boxes out of the warehouse where they're gathering dust and your trucking and your light, blah, blah, blah. I'll pay all that. But the profit element, you stick with me because I'm taking a risk here. We're coming out. We don't know who's going to come out of their houses. We don't know who's going to want to come to gigs again. Hopefully everyone's going to come, but we don't know. And it's unfair. And I know there's been a lot of conversation on this in the business for one section of the business to take all of that hit. I don't think it should be the artist. I don't think it should be the agent. I don't think it should be the promoter. Don't think it should be the venue. I don't think it should be the service company, the vendor. It should be all of us. We should all be looking at this in a much more entrepreneurial model going forward and be partners like we always should have been. The promoter, the agent, and the artist are partners, for Christ's sake. We've been enemies for too long. We've been fighting each other, and that causes problems. That causes mental distress. It causes bullying, and it causes issues, and stress. We don't want the stress on the road of the crew drinking too much or doing drugs or the rigger falling out of the rigging because he didn't have enough sleep last night because he was up doing whatever Class A drug, because it's the only way you can stay sane. So, it's really so important in so many areas. And I think it all comes back to us being partners on this. We're all partners. We're all in this together. No one should be trying to trying to be clever with anyone else, trying to do a clever trick. We're trying to reinvent this business. Let's get it back and kill with all the stakeholders, the vendors, the agents, the promoters, the venues, all working together to make sure this works and not everyone taking a hit.
Absolutely. And right now, I mean, we're seeing some of these things happen throughout the world. I mean, there's been festivals recently in Asia and things, and there's stuff happening in Europe. But now, the US is a very different place right now from a lot of the rest of the world. So, Marlene, have you seen this difference affect the way that you're booking shows and the way that the shows are being routed and things? Have you been working on anything outside of the US currently?
Um, Sorry, when you said this affecting, you mean
The
the COVID
COVID, yes,
itself?
the
Or
pandemic.
yeah, I mean, we've definitely slowed down. I mean, because we had rerouted and routed, and we just didn't know when things were going to go back to normal in any sense. I think the recent positive information about the vaccines has re-energized everybody. So, we're now starting to ramp up a little bit more. People are looking, you know, optimistically towards us hopefully having some sort of touring by next fall. Maybe this summer, not entirely sure. But yeah, it's something we have to be completely mindful of, and it is hard, as Rob said. We should be working together. There is still that push and pull where there's language put in by certain festivals or promoters about COVID that not necessarily artist friendly. It's a little bit more that promoter friendly, and I get that, but I think we have to try to get a little bit past that and work together in order for this to come back and come back the way it should in a time when everything was just about clawing to get what you wanted. I think it has to be, as Rob said, everybody clawing together to get what they need and want.
That definitely speaks to the importance of collaboration and education and figuring out what it is that we need to do in order to move forward because the situation is complicated. There's a lot of different factors because we're talking about a global touring industry. And so it's really important to just put our heads together. And I love, Rob, that you said that, leaning toward a little bit more independence in the structure of promoters and things gives you a little bit more room to add these elements that take care of the human. So one of the great things that Britton has mentioned is that having advocates on tour, helping to push forward this conversation into the future is really important. So Britton, could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think having people who are going to be forward thinking and surrounding yourself with people who are going to be making the right decisions in order to get back to work is really important. I've surrounded myself recently with a group of people who have been willing to bend over backwards in order to kind of get anything done. And I think, Rob, you said it perfectly, where uh, have a group of people who are willing to kind of work together uh, and see the bigger picture is what's really important. So if we can all do that, then I think there's a way to make this work.
Well, that's amazing. And, you know, another thing that's really important is understanding that the budget is a really big deal. So, Marlene, is that something that we're seeing that we can expect in the future for people to be putting wellness into the budget?
It's something I'd like to see happen, and I think that goes back to the educating everybody from top to bottom about factoring that in. I don't think it's been factored in really for most tours. Um, but I think we had discussed what Chris Grattan has been trying to do on the upcoming Bieber tour next year that I've been working on, having some wellness time. I know that Ariana did something similar. I think there are artists who are starting to acknowledge it and incorporate it, but it's something we have to make a more pervasive conversation. It's not going to cost that much money to have some wellness time for people. It's not going to change the bottom line that much, and I think that needs to be understood and addressed.
Absolutely. And there's some great organizations that have existed and that are collaborating with new organizations that are popping up. So someone that I'd love to highlight is the Rhodey Clinic, for example. So they are working with Chris Grattan, and they're going to be an avenue so that people can get the help that they need. And because when we talk about wellness, we're really talking about mental health, physical health, emotional health, financial health. There's a lot of elements involved. And it really does take somebody simply caring about what's going on and making sure that the conversation continues to happen. So, my final question is, how do we get people to continue caring about this when they never cared in the first place? So, Rob, could you give us a little bit about that? For what about the bullies? How do we get them to focus?
The artists have to stop hiring them. I mean, I don't know what you do about bullies. I mean, in any walk of life, as long as they get away with it, they'll stay. I mean, I've known artists fire production managers for being bullies. I've known artists praise them and love hiding behind them. You know, I mean, it's all down to the artist at the end of the day. The artist knows what's going on, or a good artist should know what's going on in his. And if there is a bully in there, it's probably because the artist likes it. Having said that, there's also most tours nowadays. I mean, as I said, 20 years, the bullies are going, and sooner they're gone the better. But the majority of tours nowadays do have a lot of sensible adults. And most of the crew I work with are really good, intelligent people. And I would imagine 99% of the tours I've worked on, there's one person I could identify who could be that wellness person, who could be, you know, the person to go to on that tour if you're feeling shit, if you're feeling fucked up, if you need to go home, blah blah blah. Most tours have an an intelligent TM or a production manager or someone on the tour who could do that role. The other thing is, a lot of the bigger tours, they have fitness coaches and masters and which could be employed wider across the team, because these people tend to be hanging around waiting for the star to go on before they do their magic. That could be done. Or a promoter could provide local massages at load-in for people who've just been on a bus for 8 hours, sleeping in a bloody coffin, as I call them. I hate sleeper bugs. Just things like that, or maybe just bring in a local physio in the morning to do a quick workout after breakfast at 1, 2, 3, 4. Just small things, as Marlene says, that don't cost a lot of money, and just to as much to make people feel that they're cared for and wanted. Even if they don't participate, having it there to show the care. And I think we need to be looking at things like that going forward. We need to realise this is work, and everyone on it is as important as everyone else.
Amazing. And I really do think it's about the little things, right? It's about somebody caring. It's about using the resources that we have available to us. So I'm also going to encourage everybody to check out showmakers.com, because that is where we've gathered tons and tons of resources that can help us move in a new and better direction, especially post-pandemic. Thank you so much, Britton, Marlene, and Rob, for joining us today.
Can I just say one last thing?
Yeah.
Thing that I think is missed of a lot of tours is the heads, whether it be the promoter or the agent, get to know the crew's names. When you walk into a building, know who's rigging your lights, know who's setting up the back line, know who's mixing the front down, know your head of securities, and say hello John, hello Pete, hello, and just know people's names. I think that goes a long way. I'll shut up now.
Hey, the human element, right? We got to know each other. We have to know each other as people. So thank you so much. There is power in numbers. Remember that. We may feel like we're just a little piece of the puzzle, but we actually do add up to a really big, huge production in the end. So thank you so much for joining me on this panel. And I hope to have more conversations like this. Remember to have these conversations at home and with your circle of influence. Thank you so much.